Our guest today is Sarah Edwards. Sarah is Chief Product Officer at Kantata, an innovative project management solution tailored for professional services. She is an expert in product strategy and innovation, and Sarah drives solutions that improve collaboration and adapt to evolving work environments, guiding professionals towards more efficient, successful outcomes. And indeed, she is with us today to talk about how professional services can streamline project delivery and embrace innovation to drive better results. So, Sarah, welcome to the program today. From your point of view, how has project management evolved recently, especially with the rise of remote and hybrid work models?
Yeah, it's great to be here, Kevin. And it's an industry that I've worked in for a long time. And I think I've really seen that shift over the last few years in terms of how projects are changing. And I think there's two key themes that I'd like to highlight. I think one is actually the shape of projects and the makeup of projects has fundamentally changed. And I think a lot of that's been driven by sort of that hybrid and remote working. So I think projects, gone are the projects where you just put a team on a project and they go and do that one project and they move on to the next. Projects are much more high velocity. There's repeat services, there's smaller projects. It's much more agile working. And actually, you're having to manage projects across multiple customers, multiple engagement models. So it's really turned into much more sort of high volume game. And I think alongside that, it's actually become tougher because actually client and teams' expectations have changed. Because of that, clients expect quicker time to value, tighter timelines. They expect you to be more transparent and more flexible. And yet you've got teams that are also demanding, well, actually, I want to get my work-life balance right. I want the ability to work from home. So I think that managing of that sort of different team dynamics has become a lot harder. And there's a lot more demands from both a client and a team perspective.
Well, I spent some time in professional services, and I know from my experience and from my colleagues' experience that the nature of professional services has changed quite a bit. What are some of the biggest challenges professional services firms face today in managing projects effectively, and what should we do about it?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Kevin, that it's changed. And I think, go back to my first point, I think the challenge is that projects are no longer neatly bounded. I think you're delivering recurring services to your customers. You're delivering different commercial models. I was talking to a customer today where they talked about the shift from sort of time and materials billing to fixed fee. I think we're now seeing more of a shift to annuity-based services, to outcome-based, sort of pricing, etc. So I think there's been a real shift in, how you're having to manage some of the commercial managements of projects and managing those different styles of projects and engagements. And I think there's also been a real shift because of that from just measuring sort of project health actually to managing client health. It's actually about how there's much more pressure on services firms to have recurring revenue sources. So actually you need to make sure that you're delivering successfully to your clients for the life cycle of that customer. And it's about repeat services and repeat revenue, and monitoring that sort of customer health is really important. And I think, the skill sets of people have had to change as well. I think project managers are no longer just managing schedules, they're managing relationships, they're managing outcomes. They've got to connect those insights and they've got to start managing projects in a different way.
You mentioned the pressure of recurring income and services. This has always been a pressure in professional services, but even more so now. In your experience, what role does leadership and team culture play in driving success?
I think it plays a huge, I think to me, it's the sort of make or break factor with projects. I mean, I think when you look at a project, whether it's a small project, whether it's a large project, let's be real, no project is risk-free. And I think actually what truly separates success for a project is how well teams adapt and respond to those risks and challenges along the way. And that comes down to things like cultural fit and flow of the project and the project team working with the client team. I think, I've seen projects where you can put your top talent on a project, but it can be derailed, because there's not that cultural fit or alignment. I think one of the challenges is when we're staffing projects, we often overlook that sort of cultural fit element. And I think the other thing we overlook is that stakeholder engagement needs to be continuous. Often it's high in the sales cycle, it sort of drops off, and then you get stakeholders engaged when there's an escalation. I think you've got to be looking at how we're putting that governance in place, not just as a one-off discipline, but throughout the project, how we're building those relationships, how we're working with customers. Leadership, to me, on a project and governance isn't just about structure, it's about steering the project in the right direction, making sure we're making the right decisions along the way to manage risk and to deliver outcomes. And then the other thing I'd maybe finally add is I think you need to think about your culture. I think, to me, it's about how do we drive a culture of collaboration and continuous improvement rather than that sort of blame culture. I think teams who thrive and survive are teams that have that psychological safety, that they can really sort of look at, I'm going to escalate issues openly with the customer or internally and have some of those honest and frank conversations, because that's what will drive successful outcomes.
You mentioned the need for teams to adapt and have a feeling of safety and innovation, really the right cultural fit. But when organizations struggle with project management or adoption or change management, what strategies work best from a leadership point of view? What strategies should I consider to ensure that my teams can adapt, do feel safe, and there is efficiency and effectiveness within those teams?
Yeah, I think it needs to again come top down. I think you need to be clear, what's the vision? Why are we driving this change? What's the outcomes? What are the behaviors that we want to see and why? And I think people need to understand that so that they're driving change and they understand the outcomes that we're trying to achieve as a business. And then I think, how do you foster that right culture in the business? So how do you create that environment where it's about encouraging feedback, it's about driving continuous improvement and focusing on, the outcomes we're looking to achieve, not just the specific tasks along the way. And that's all of that also needs to be combined with, you've got to equip your people with the right tools that enable them, to drive that adoption and drive that change. And it's not a one-off thing. I think, again, you need to be thinking about how you continuously driving adoption and change and training and support for your teams to reinforce that value and where we need to go.
I am speaking today with Sarah Edwards. Sarah is Chief Product Officer at Kantata, and she's with us today to talk about how professional services firms can streamline project delivery and embrace innovation in ways that drive better results. You can find out more at kantata.com. That's Kantata.com. Now, Sarah, we've been talking a bit about teams and the culture. Let's talk a little bit more about the specific tools. Now, how do you see emerging trends and tools, and specifically which tools are shaping the future of project management within professional services today?
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't be here if I didn't mention the word AI. I think it's on the front of everyone's minds. And I think AI and agents and technology is transforming the industry. And I think it's going to transform the roles within that industry, particularly, project management. So I think, to me, the role of a project manager is evolving and will continue to evolve, moving more from a sort of task manager to what I'd call like strategic orchestrators. The future of a project manager is managing the relationships, managing the risk, managing the outcomes we're delivering to that customer. And actually, I should be leveraging technology to drive automation of updating the plan or creating me a status report or, compiling lists of risks and issues on the project. I shouldn't be spending my time doing that. Technology should be there to enable me to do that. And also I think the role of technology is around how does it enable me to make, better decisions and proactive decisions on the projects that I'm managing. So I think for the first time, we really have the opportunity to bring together the sort of structured traditional metrics of project success. Is it on time? Is it on budget, etc., with unstructured data? Like, what's the sentiment of the customer? What are we seeing on the emails and the calls and the interactions that are happening with the team or with the customer? And how do we use that data to guide me as a project manager to detect risks earlier, and to do something about them before escalations occur. And again, I think that's that shift to how you become outcome-centric management. I think, with the future sort of tooling and even the tooling that's available today, I think it's much more about project managers managing outcomes versus just time and effort and tracking that sort of, that value. And I think it's going to become more important because I think even particularly for services firms, ultimately, I think they're at an inflection point where they're going to have to start driving to selling their services based on outcome and value-based pricing. It's no longer about just selling it based on the state of T&M or headcount. And I think that's going to fundamentally sort of change the shift and the roles of project management in the future.
I'm glad you mentioned AI because I am curious how you folks at Cantata are taking advantage of AI. Can you describe that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, we're doing it in a number of ways. I think, to me, AI has two sort of key plays, I guess. One is around efficiency. How are we driving automation of tasks? How are we really freeing up our project managers and our resources? So we had a great example where, creating a status report, probably a task of a project manager has always been pulling together the latest risks, issues, statuses. Well, why isn't AI helping to automate that and pulling it together a version, and then the PM's just reviewing that before sending that out? So I think efficiency of project managers is going to be really important. I think the other thing, as I say, is that insight. How are we bringing together, and we're leveraging AI to predict when there's going to be a risk on a project, predict change coming on a project, recommend how you should be managing that. So really giving that sort of insight, servicing that insight to the project manager to enable them to be much more proactive on tasks.
Now, you folks at Kantata are all about a holistic approach that integrates project, resource, and financial management. Can you describe that holistic approach and why that is a driver for success today?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably one of the things I'm most passionate about, because I think, to me, projects, when you talk about, project management and delivering projects, they're not just schedules. They're not just about plans and tasks. They're actually about integrated, systems, processes, and people. True project health and success is more than just, managing a set of tasks on a plan. It's about the resources on that project. It's about the financials of that project. It's about the delivery of that project and the outcomes it achieves. And all of those things are continuously interconnected. There's that interconnection between effort, availability, financial management. And I think unless you've got those things connected, you can't truly sort of manage proactively project success. So even things like, resource management, that to me is critical for projects, but it's not just I'm going to set up a team and forget about it. It needs to be proactively managed through the life cycle of that project. Different skills come into play at different points in the project. How are we making sure that we've got the right teams continuously engaging in the right way on that project? And all of that has to be done in the context of financials, because it's all great delivering great outcomes to a customer, but are we making margin on that project? As I make my decisions on that project, I need to make sure that I understand and can plan the financial impacts of that. So I think, we need to be able to bring those things together and enable project managers to sort of model and forecast how this project is performing and understand, what can I be doing, whether it's burning a day on a fixed fee project that impacts my margin, how can I, be bringing that back in? What proactive steps can I take? And I think it's that holistic view that enables you to make those sort of, what I'd say, smarter trade-offs. How do I make sure that, I've got the information and the insight to balance capacity, cost, and outcomes on my project, so that we can deliver, return on investment, importantly for our business, but also for our customers as well.
You mentioned resource management is critical. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think a project is about managing people on projects. To me, it's a resource that you're putting teams on projects ultimately to deliver to your clients. And I think, how are you scheduling those people? Have you got the right mix of skills? Have you got the right cultural fit? Have I got the right people at the right time, engaging in the right way for our customers for success? So I think you can't, to me, how you staff and manage your resources is an important part of successful project delivery.
And change management. Suppose I am a professional services firm, a leader, and I'm looking to bring in some more innovative tools like Kantata. But those tools are only as good as the adoption of those tools among my people. So how does Kantata ensure that the tools are user-friendly and promote adoption among teams really on the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we talk about usability, to me, particularly now more than ever, it's sort of non-negotiable. I think, times have changed. People demand now. I think the workforce demands that tools are easy to use, they haven't got to go through a steep learning curve of using that. And some of that is about understanding how people work and having flexible tools. One of the things I'm very proud of in our tool is actually flexing it. Not every project's the same. Not every customer works the same. How do we make sure that that tool can flex based on your role, the context of the project, the context of your business, and how it operates? And I think AI, again, has a great place to play here. When we talk about, I think the way that people are interacting with tools is changing. I think we all probably use agents and we're all using ChatGPT and everything. It changes the way you interact with systems. systems. Actually, what I want the system to do is surface me with insights, and I want to be asked to ask a question. I don't want to have to go and navigate and know the click path through the system to get that information. And we always talk a lot about Kantata about insights fine-tune. It's something we're really passionate about in how we design our tools. Is people shouldn't know the question they have to ask, and they shouldn't know how to get there. Actually, the tool needs to surface that up to the user and help them to sort of proactively take the right actions on their projects. And then I think, let's be clear, adoption has to be continuous. It's not a one and we're done sort of thing. It has to be, we have to give the training to the users. We have to them understand why we're getting them to do this, why this is important. And I think one of the things we do with our customers is we track engagement and adoption of the system, and we report it to our customers so we can understand and we can tie that to the results that they're looking to achieve. Because we know adoption of certain capabilities or ways of working results in value and adoption to our customers. So I think having the insight of how that adoption is working is really important as well.
I am speaking today with Sarah Edwards. She is Chief Product Officer at Kantata. She's an expert in product strategy and innovation, and she drives solutions that improve collaboration and adapt to evolving work environments, helping professional services firms embrace innovation and drive better results. Find out more at kantata.com. That's Kantata. Now, Sarah, can you give us an example of one organization that you feel has been particularly successful using this approach? What did they do and what were the results?
Yeah, I'd like to highlight Finastra. There's a great customer success story on our website for our customer Finastra, but it was one that I was particularly involved closely with. And for them, it was all around how do we take a data-driven approach to driving business change across the business. And actually at the center of that was how do I empower my project managers to shift from what was pretty reactive management today to proactive management, and leveraging that data to do that in a consistent way across the business. They talked about this idea of one Finastra. How do I make sure that we've got different parts of the business working standardized ways, because actually that can give us the data and the insight we need to drive improvements. And they had significant improvements. It was 36% reduction in cost leakage on their projects in the first year, because they were able to take corrective action earlier. They had that insight. And importantly, they still do that today. What I love about Finastra is they're using our system to every month on a regular basis. They're looking at, well, okay, how are our projects being delivered? And what does that tell us in terms of how we should be scoping our projects? How are we getting better at scoping our projects in the first place so that we know that we can deliver those successfully and we're not leaking revenue or cost, but we're ultimately driving success. So I think for me, what underscores the success at Finastra was to say that data-driven decision-making, standardizing process and governance, but importantly, empowering their teams and particularly their project managers. And it was a big sort of behavioral change for them. I think it was a different way of working. But I think the fact that they know that's a continuous journey, they're evaluating that and continuously learning from the data and driving improvements is a great success story.
Sarah, we have reached the action item round of the program. I'm wondering if you could please provide us with 3 quick action items that our listeners can use to take advantage of your ideas and advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Number one, leverage data-driven decision making. So I think start connecting that data and enabling your project managers to use that data to get insight to how projects are really performing. What's the sentiment on that project? What's the risk on that project? What's the performance on that project? I think empower your project managers with automation would be my point number 2. Adopt an AI first strategy. How are we leveraging AI? How are we using tools to free up our project managers to focus on, client relationships and risks and outcome management, not worrying about, the day-to-day of, updating plans and automating as much process as you can. And then I think the third point is around how do you get your teams to focus beyond just tasks and said schedules, get them focused on the value they're delivering and the outcomes they're delivering to customers, because that's ultimately what you want the value of your project managers to be. It should be about outcome navigation and how we're empowering our business project managers to achieve that, and making sure that we're celebrating the success of that, because we ultimately need to sell that to our next customer in terms of differentiating with the outcome and the value that we're delivering to our customers.
Sarah, it has been great speaking with you today. We're almost out of time, but before I let you go, one last question. What should executives, business owners, really all of us, be thinking about now and strategizing for today in order to be prepared for the world in 5 years' time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's even being prepared for the world in probably 1 year's time, rather than five. But I think it's embracing AI. It's got to be part of your core business strategy. And that's not just about technology. I think it's about, to me, what's really important is rethinking your approach to delivery. What are my roles of the future? Because I think the way that roles work today, like project managers, is going to evolve in terms of how they use AI technology and how we can drive better decision making, drive better efficiency, by better automation across the business. I think the other thing is, how do you shift from project success to customer success? Again, comes back to what I said at the beginning. There's this repeating services, the structure and shape of projects is changing in professional services. And I think it's really important to make sure you've got a view of what is client success and customer success? How am I managing outcomes and value? And how am I managing that across the life cycle of the customer? Because, that needs to be sustained. It's not just about selling it on one project and moving on to the next. And as I said before, I think create that continuous learning loop. I think, all of us are learning with AI. I think, to me, you need to have that continuous feedback loop. How are we driving improvements? How are we looking at how we're improving, how we package and sell and deliver our services? Because ultimately, that's what we should be asking ourselves now. What's the next thing I can automate with an agent? What's the next thing I could do to improve how I'm scoping projects, or how I'm improving how I'm delivering value to our customers quicker, at, lower cost, quicker time to value? So it's that continuous learning, adaptation, and automation, which I think is really important.
That is Sarah Edwards from Kantata. Sarah, it's been great speaking with you today. Thank you so much for being our guest on the Digital Transformation Podcast.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been great to be here. Thank you.